I welcome all members and thank you for coming. And just to let everybody know, I'd like to welcome the leader who's requested that he sit in the gallery, to listen to the debate and hope that he'll be able to enhance decision making in Cabinet next week. So hope nobody's got any objections. No? Everyone happy? Okay, thank you.
I'm shaking my head. There's no objection.
Yeah. I'm glad you clarified that, Councillor Morby. Right. Okay, so have we had any apologies?
Yeah, we've received apologies from Mr Gwyn Smith.
Councillor John Marshall.
Item agenda 2, declarations of interest. Tim, would you like to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't anticipate any declarations this afternoon, members, but if you do have any questions, then please let me have them. And can I just remind you also that if there are any declarations which emerge, they should be noted in the appropriate sheet of the attendance register. So any questions, members, or are you all happy with where we are? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Right, okay. So, agenda item 3. Oh, sorry. Right, I'd like to read out the statement. We welcome the use of the Welsh language at public meetings. I've not received notice that members or invited attendees wish to use Welsh today, and therefore the meeting will be conducted in English only. So we move on to the agenda item 3, future of the library service in Torfaen. Just to recap, that this is a special meeting which has been called due to our last meeting on the 10th of November. Members felt that we didn't have enough information and sufficient information required to make a recommendation. So all questions were asked and collated and forwarded to officers, which they form Appendix 1 of the report. I'd just like to say that this is the last chance we have as a team and as a group need to come to a conclusion and form a recommendation. Cabinet is next week, and if possible, going forward, we'd like to come to a conclusion and recommendation to forward to Cabinet next week. So, you've all got the report in front of you. So this meeting going forward, hosts any members have any supplementary questions to the supporting information relating to the report and Appendix 1, or any clarification needed on any of the information. So I'm going to call the officers in, and then we'll, if anybody got any information, clarifying questions. Yeah, okay. Okay, so if anybody's got any information, clarifying questions, you've all got the report in front of you, yeah? You've all had a chance to read it. Right, I'd like to welcome Kath Thomas, Chris George, Joe Lewis and Duncan Smith to the meeting. Thank you for coming. Okay, so, members, is there any clarification needed or questions relating to the information? No? Councillor Jones.
I just have one, perhaps Kath could answer this. With regard to the old library, which was situated in Lion Street in Blanavon, obviously we moved then to the new site at the Heritage Centre. I just wondered, that building has now been sold. How much did Torfaen get for that building? And would that money be made available for the current savings structure, or would it go into assets or
It's still be, sorry. Yes, it is being sold. It has took longer than we wanted to, but it's to do with bits of legalities. The person who's buying it has changed their solicitors now, so that's still on, which is good news because it's a local company and has already created 2 or 3 jobs within Blaenavon. So that's good news as selling the library, really. I think the valuation was 130, and I think we sold it for 10% less than that, but that was due to the conditions of the building. They reduced it because of the amount of work that's required on it. And the money does go into a central pot rather than anywhere,
So there's no way that that money can go forward to the current savings proposal?
Not that I'm aware of, really. No, it just goes into the capital receipt budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ashley.
Actually got 2 questions here. One is the one about the figures in Cumbrian Library. Obviously, you only got up to October. Are you expecting the figures for Cumbrian Library to stay at their current level? I've looked at sort of historical trends. The 135,000 people going through, if it goes on the current trend, we're going to be past, so it's made quite a lot. So that's fair enough. So that's a good number. The other question which I looked at, which needs some explanation, and I'm going to ask it. We looked at the lease of Cumbrian Library, which is this is a lot of really good information in here, which I compliment on because it's really good. Was the lease expires in 2070, initial rent 20 grand, and then you've got service charge times 4, 11,000. So does it cost us 11,000 a year to rent it? The other thing I wanted to know was, bear in mind to do with resources, is that obviously we've got other costs on that library, like repair or when we want to do alterations. What's your sort of average take on doing things like that? Obviously, because you've had to do things. Is there sort of average cost on doing that? Because that actually looks remarkably cheap for that library.
The rent, I think, is £2,000 a year, actually.
Yeah.
And then the 11,000 is for central charges, cleaning up the town, litter, and all of that, so we have to have the larger fees for that. And then, in terms of the repair of the building, that's done essentially through our assets team as well. So that doesn't actually come out. So if we need repairs, that doesn't come out of the library budget. That actually comes out of a central pot. And obviously that's only done on when it's absolutely required, because you'll all be aware that that's heavily pulled on as well. So we only do repairs as in at the buildings, such as the Workman's Hall, as and when there's funding available within that pot.
So any repairs that are done on the external of the building, are they like the problem we have with the Congress? Do we do them, or do... No, I'm only asking that question because bear in mind I'm on the board of Congress Theatre. It's just across the square, and it's a little bit of a mishmash between Cumbrian Shopping, whoever owns Cumbrian Shopping, and the borough. So I know you have had issues in the past on that.
I'm not sure, actually. I think the best...
Remember the ongoing problems we've had with the Congress, and similar construction, similar roofs and similar problems.
Well, Christine might have more information than that.
Repairs to the fabric of the building, like the roof, which we have had, ongoing problems on and off for a long time. Yes, those are paid for by the landlord. But if there are internal repairs to anything that's happened within the building, then that is, as Kath said, paid for by property. Yeah.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. And my inquiry is in the same vein as my colleague, Councillor Jones. I was under the impression that the savings of the relocation of the library and the sale of the old library were to be used as part of this savings exercise. And I was going to ask the question, was what percentage did that bring in the savings round?
What savings did the selling of the building?
Well, not only the selling of the building, the relocation to the area centre.
The relocation saved 100,000. And that was through, we don't have the ongoing costs of the building we got rid of. We don't have taxes the same as the two buildings, so you reduce that. If you recall, there was a reduction in staff in the World Heritage Centre, including a cleaner and a front of house staff. There was some reductions within the library, and it all came to 100,000 savings. The 100 and whatever we got in for the building is quite separate.
Can you expand on that then, Kath? What I wanted to know was, in the round of savings that you had to make last year, with that relocation, what percentage did that release in the overall savings overall?
I'm sorry, Stuart, I don't understand. I didn't release anything. What we had to do was save 100,000 out of that budget, the library budget, which we did. It didn't release any more money to go anywhere else. It was a saving. So it's a loss of 100,000 out of that budget.
Right, okay.
Any capital receipt received by the council goes in, as Kath said, into a central pot. It doesn't go back into the saving. And then there's policy choice is made about how that is spent. So that doesn't become part of the saving. Although the council
can come back on that, Chair. Yeah, I understand that, and it goes into the general pot, yes. But what I'm saying is, it's still a saving identified, which we were going to identify for the libraries. In essence, although it goes into the pot, it's still a saving from the library service.
You've got to remember that the saving made was a revenue saving. Not a capital saving. The capital goes into the capital programme. You must look at that totally separately from the saving that was made on revenue expenditure.
And we're talking about a previous year as well. That was the requirement, £100,000 from the library service for 2015-16. And, okay, it helps perhaps clarify the position overall in terms of what's fair to do in future, because Blenavon has already made a saving, but it isn't money we can count twice, is really what I'm saying.
Anybody else got any questions? Alan?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a number of questions, actually, but I'll leave them until we move through other people asking their questions. I'll go straight into them. But overall, at the last meeting, I asked whether or not we had a strategy for libraries, and I was told that we did. And within the paper, it clarifies that that's actually the All Wales strategy on libraries, in terms of Libraries Inspire. And that's quoted, but there's also a Libraries Expert Review quoted as well within this document in 2014, and it strongly recommends the use of a delivery plan to actually outline how that strategy would be implemented. For example, Caerphilly's got a 5-year development plan based on the 10-year strategy. I just wanted to ask initially, where's ours?
Well, we don't have a delivery plan. What we have is SIPs and TIPs, and we have a 3-year team implementation plan. So in there will be 3 years of what the library is going to be doing in the next 3 years.
I think it just clarifies some other things throughout the paper which I'm going to know, that we don't really have a strategy, and that's my big problem. We don't know what library is going to look like in 5 years. I think had we had a strategy 2 or 3 years ago when we made the changes at Blenavon and looked at Cumran, we might have gone for self-service then and maybe saved ourselves £500,000 in the interim period. And I think we're just looking to find 250,000 rather than having taken a strategic view about where we move libraries to, which could save us more. And I'll give you an example. When we look at the budget, for instance, we've got a total figure from the budget figure you've given of 877,000, of which 664,000 is staff. So that's 76% of the total cost. then we've got this reduction of 250,000, which would bring us to a budget of 627, with a 414 staff cost, which is 66%. Now, if we look at the UK average, which is a pretty decent one to have, that's 60%, it would be 376k. So possibly there's another 38,000 to find within there as well. I'm not suggesting that we should or do. I'm just saying that I don't think we've looked at this from the point of view of how we develop the service. I just think we've looked at it from the point of view of how we can make this saving. Is that fair?
In some ways, it could be fair, because obviously we don't always know what savings are coming up, because, well, the local authority won't even know what their grant is coming off Welsh Government. So, within local authority, it's always very difficult to preempt what's going to happen in terms of budgets. We know that there is cuts coming, but you never know which service is going to have them. And, if you did this in a more holistic way, you're quite right. It could have been that actually we'll take one sweeping decision to self-automate all of the libraries, and, it could have been one clean process. But it just hasn't worked out that way, because budgets in local authority don't work that way. We did an annual budget the 1 year, and we've done 2 years, the next 2 years. So, it's difficult. Even if we did plan a 5-year plan, I could guarantee you within a few years that would have to change, because local government will change and the funding will change. So it's difficult to do. But what we have tried to do in all of those changes is to do it on a strategic basis, following best practice. And what I would say, what we have done, and we are commended by MOLD for doing that, is that we have been innovative in the way we've done it in co-location, and even through this disruptive technology in terms of what we're doing for self-service. It's been done, and if you look at the case studies throughout the country, which we've shown you, it's all pretty much doing the same thing. I guess you're saying we will have had the opportunity to have had more savings, but that hasn't how it's worked out in terms of the way the budget is run through Welsh Government and local government, really.
I mean, I don't totally accept that, because the Council itself develops a strategy and a corporate plan, and that plan will have to change, but it's changed within the original vista that they had when you make other decisions. And I think, you need to look forward to see what it's going to look like, otherwise you just chop and you don't know what it's going to look like. Because right now we've got increased footfall, and I take the difference between footfall and book issues, or call it turnover maybe. We've increased footfall, and yet the number of issues are declining, and the number of members are declining. And it's how we actually arrest that decline. Can we? I mean, if we don't, what we've got to be paying out for declining service, which will eventually disappear. I mean, have 3 premises, it'll be no useful. Because I think, as well as in the paper, it almost shows in one part of it that actually the numbers are increasing, because it compares last year with the year before. However, if we go to the year before, we actually had 4,178 per thousand people of population using the service. So it is still declining. But I don't think we really know what our picture is going to be of where we go. I still have the feeling we just look to meet this 250,000.
No, I think the service, we do know that the service is declining, and it has been right across the country. But in terms of some of the reasons behind that, it's not necessarily because of the book loan, or it might be the book loan, and that's why the self-service, and we can release staff to get on with doing some of the other stuff, that the quality services that people do. Oh, sorry, I thought something. Do value and use the libraries for. And again, I think libraries isn't just about business here. This is about social inclusion, tackling poverty. So it has other issues around it. It isn't just about, can we do this well and can we increase the footfall? This is about looking after, if you like, the most deprived and, people who are excluded from society as well. So there's a balance to be made on terms of how we run the libraries, really, and how we value that as a committee, I guess.
My comments actually totally relate to doing that in a better way. in terms of social inclusion and access and everything else. And I'm not suggesting that we move away from that. But what I will say is I don't see within the paper where we've really looked at our customers who are using the library in terms of even when they're using it. Because we have the number of opening hours. Within the paper, you give us a list of everybody else's opening hours and try to justify our opening hours with theirs. Well, you can't do that. You've just counted up what they've done and said, we are doing this. I mean, do we know any books we issue or take back by hour within the libraries? By morning, by day?
And can I ask the
can I
numbers
just finish
that...
this point a minute, Mandy? Just because it finishes with this. 15% of our population are over 60. The rest are working, of the people who are using the libraries are working or in school. You know, should we reinvented our model? I take their shift workers as well, to be inclusive a bit more, that we might be later in the night, not open in the day, and remodel it. But I think we don't know from the papers and from information we've been given when people are actually visiting and using it, so that we could perhaps re-engineer the number of hours that we are there and use them more effectively.
Just wanted to clarify that the numbers in the sheets are the footfall. It's actually people who are not using the library, it's just footfall going into customer care. Yes. Yeah.
The numbers you will have seen is the increases when they're co-located, and that's because there's other services there. We're not trying to hide anything. You know, there is a decline in libraries for book club. There could be a number of reasons for that. One of them, Welsh Government will tell you, is that our fund for renewing books is so low that people don't come there because you haven't got good enough resources. And our books, you know, funding has decreased year on year. So there's lots of reasons why that could be happening, and there could be a piece of research and looking into that. And there's a lot of people, you might have read the press, that are saying, let's go back to basics, let's get the book loaning going again and all of that. We're not a social body. We should be doing the books again. That will bring the footfall in. You know, personally, will that really happen with the kids with the new technology? Won't it be more going more through technology rather than in footfall? I don't know. What we've got to do, you're quite right, I don't think we've done opening hours as in we looked at every hours and we're justifying hours. I think it's quite the other way round, actually. Our opening hours have evolved through our customer demand. We showed you, the other people, what they were doing, and the reason why they do that is for equalities. That's why we retained a Saturday morning so that people who are working can go there, and we retained a couple of late evenings so that people who are working and or after school clubs, when they want to do homework, those are the evenings they want to do it. I'm not saying they can't be reviewed or looked at and improved, maybe so, but at the moment this proposal was to try and keep it so that the customer understood that it was a service they had and it wasn't changing too drastically, even though there was a huge amount of money taken out of the service area. So I wouldn't propose changing those times at the moment, because that is what our customers are saying to us they want. We haven't had any customers come to us saying we want more or less days and more evenings, but we could certainly ask those questions going forward.
Sorry, just to hold this, but one more. Can I ask where that information is detailed in terms of what our customers want and when? Where are the actual facts on that? Because we've not seen them.
Well, you've got a few surveys from adults, children, library at homes. There's a few surveys that you have had, and none of them are in there telling us that we don't like the hours.
Well, I don't think we really asked that question totally, did we? Within that, well, that's my point. Within the survey, and nor have we looked at non-users either to see what would get them to use the library, i.e. why don't you use it? I'm just saying that the information we have is pretty flimsy in terms of what's been presented.
I think in terms of the questions that you asked, we've answered them. In terms of the strategy, Kath said that we haven't got a local strategy. We haven't got a local strategy. We were within a strategy, an all-Wales strategy, and I think the point you've made, we need a strategy, has been taken. And I don't think we're going to lose that. If you want to assess what we did, or have done, or proposed to you, we have worked to a form of strategy, and I think members have largely gone along with that strategy, which is retain facilities in each of the main towns. I think by default, although we don't describe it as strategic, Cwmbran is the strategic library for the area. And we've worked on the principle that we would want to harm the service as little as possible in terms of the overall cut. And I think in terms of how we've done that, we've largely gone along with that unwritten strategy, if you like, rather than written strategy. In terms of the detail that you've mentioned, I agree. I think we do need to do those sorts of research, and that's something that we accept totally.
I think going forward, we could recommend that you do as much research as possible and possibly a survey, also ensuring that we future-proof the library service as much as possible. Stuart.
Following on from that, the other, I mean, I'm looking at what we provide, and certainly in Cymran, the reference system, because people don't have access to things like university libraries anymore. Around here, they've gone away. And that was something I'd have to keep pointing out in terms of whether we're going to develop our electronic take and whether we can get membership by having access to online services, because that's certainly things that people, knowing I was going to do this, people have asked me. The other aspect of it is the whole thing around unemployed and people that, you know, have to do things, because when the library was shut, I was being asked by unemployed people I know, where do I go to get computer access? And this is an important hub system. You mentioned the Baroness Andrew hub system, and we're aware as councillors, I think that needs to be in place. And I think that whatever was going out about this particular meeting was access, and people were obviously worried about that. Now we've got these 3 library locations, possibly community halls around, and really that's all we've got.
Councillor Mulvey?
Yeah, thanks. I don't think anybody on the council relishes the thought of having to reduce services, particularly services which are valuable for the purposes of learning at all ages. And I'm certainly a sort of a devotee, if you like, of services which actually enhance the individual's ability to progress themselves as human beings in terms of economics and social mobility and so on. But we are where we are, and none of us likes being there. We have decided as a council that the library service is not one of those to which we would give particular priority. A lot of us weren't necessarily very happy about that, but you know, if you make everything a priority, of course nothing is a priority, and the line we took was in relation to social care and cleaner and greening and obviously schools. And that's where we are. And I think what we're doing now is actually trying to find the way of achieving the council's savings, which by default we agreed with, whether you like it or not. We agreed the 250,000 saving. Council has made that decision. But what we want to do is make sure that that reduction in budget has the minimal effect on the objectives that we feel that the libraries fulfil within our communities. So I think it's, as I said in an email to colleagues some time ago, it's not whether we make the saving, it's how we make the saving to ensure that as much as possible we retain a service which meets most, if not all, people's needs, recognising, of course, that those needs are changing as the development of new technology and so on. But I think we need to stop talking about, if we are talking about whether we make this saving or not, because I think that's a given. Let's actually find a way of achieving some of the things that Alan has brought to our attention. Yeah. In terms of what happens elsewhere, and not just Alan, but the questions that Alan asked, which prompted the research which officers have done. And I think that's a valuable exercise which we would, as you've already indicated, Chair, recommend to Cabinet that they pursue to a greater extent, so that in future there will be a body of evidence in relation to what people want, need within Torfaen, and how that can best be delivered, which will inform decision-making in future. And hopefully that will create a strategic plan for library services which is particular to Torfaen, albeit it's got to be complementary to the All Wales strategic plan, otherwise the Welsh Government probably won't be terribly happy, and other Wales bodies may not be terribly happy in those circumstances. But given that we do that, how do we manage with the situation we're in now? Now, to me, we're talking about pain, primarily for the individuals who will lose their jobs, frankly, but we're also talking about pain and inconvenience to people who won't be able to do what they've done in the past, which is go to the library on on the half day that they can go because it's closed. Now we're going to try and avoid that by having the library open, but with a different sort of service, a self-service rather than a service provided by professional librarians. And that is a matter of regret to me, but it's still better than closing entirely either one library or closing all of the libraries on certain days per week. Much better to keep them open, if only to give the opportunity somebody who's otherwise cold and wet to go in and read the newspaper. Why not? And they, even if they don't take a book out, even if they don't perform any or have any service performed for them, they are still there doing what they want to do, and within reason, as long as it falls within the purview of a library provision, then why not? So I want to keep them open as much as possible. I think that's the view from the staff, the professionals concerned, that's the view from the managers, and great. And what we want to say to the Cabinet, I would have thought, is, yeah, we think keeping them open as much as possible within the budgetary constraints is the way forward. Hopefully it means that when we're looking at a strategy for the future, that we do so on the basis of not having lost any assets.
Yeah.
And that's important, I think, and closure of a building which houses library services in any one of the locations would mean the loss of assets, which, maybe someday we'll be in a position to spend more on libraries than we are now. So I think it's simply coming down to a question in my mind, given that we've got more work to do, or suggesting that officers have more work to do in advising on how we have our own unique strategy, we've got to give a clear steer of how we're going to make these £250,000 cut. And to me, it's fairly simple. It's either 3A or 3B. And which, I'm not terribly exercised about, but I think Stuart made the point that, or somebody made the point that Cwm Bran is the closest we've got to a strategic library service, and I would prefer that to retain that status, if you like, of being the premier library within Cwm Bran, maintaining as far as possible good reference provision. And regrettably, in those circumstances, Pontypool and Blenavon becomes more of a book borrowing provider rather than all the other services that a library can provide. That's not to say there shouldn't be professional expertise in both Pontypool and Blenavon now and in future. Yeah. But that's what I think we need to do.
And I think a lot of confusion from the public is that they think that we are closing a library, and I think none of us want to do that. We want to keep a library open every day as possible, so it's just working out a rota on different days. Yeah, go on, Stuart.
Yeah, I would say very practically, following on what Brian said, is they've got 3 libraries. This report reflects that. I think it's, it's added meat to what we asked about. Taking on what Alan said about the case urban strategy, which I think you've already heard that, which is good. There's a lot going on in these libraries, and there will still be a lot going on. We use the Baroness Andrews model of activity. And there's a lot of our voluntary organisations use them, and hopefully the bit you put in about we're not substituting, because the librarians and the people that work out of these give us professional expertise, which we need. Look, and the book take, the electronic take, all of that is about learning, it's about cultural things, and all that is in this report. If people want to actually go and read it outside and have a look at it, we need to reflect on the cultural thing of this valley, which, again, unfortunately is not in our aims as a council, but cultural life of this valley and what people do all through their lives. It's really, really important. Brian's just said most of that, but I'm not going to say any more of that.
Alan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I agree with everything that Councillor Morby said, actually, with one small rider to that I'll come back to in a moment, but he included in his encapsulation of what I said. And I do believe if we had a real strategy being developed, we would have had a few different options in front of us, and maybe would have come to some different conclusions. Still, actually, if we're going to save 250k, as was stated, we're going to save 250k. So I agree with that entirely. We are where we are in terms of what we're going to do. The only thing that I do disagree with is in terms of Cwmbran. I hear this word strategic library. I didn't see anything strategic in the paper about Cwmbran being a strategic library, nor others within the examples that were given. It was talked about, but there's no actual facts that bear that out, that it should be a strategic library. But let's still call it a strategic library, if you wish. In terms of 3, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't be for 3 for each of them, rather than 2.5, 2.5 and 4. Because if you move to that one, believe me, the council will be accused of favouring the south end of the borough again against the north. That's a silly old argument that I don't believe in many cases, but in some cases has an element of fact with it. I think in terms of moving this, you'd be silly to move away from that 333. It doesn't stop Cwmbran being the strategic library. I actually feel that it could be the only library with some outposts where we actually do an e-catalogue across many different places that we have dotted around the borough with deliveries to and from services. I think that could have been developed from there and maybe found some more economies. But however, that isn't in front of us. What is in front of us is whether we go 333, 2.5, 2.5, 4, which I think was what Councillor Morby said as well. So I don't see the case for actually moving it, particularly as it does have actually 68% of our stock in Cwmbran already for 53% of the population, whereas Pontypool actually only has 19% of its stock for 40% of the population. So I don't see that as being equal if you then give it less for service in those couple of days. But I think the other thing is, and I agree with Councillor Morby, I think we've also gone at this from a very negative point of view. And if you read within the report the instance of Peterborough, I think Peterborough have a very positive spin on what they are doing, which is roughly the same as what we are proposing to do. Yet ours looks very, very negative. It's very negative out there. If you look at the posts on there, there are very few, probably about between 5 and 10% of people who accept what we are doing, about 90% don't. And they're all very much in favour in terms of where they live, in terms of some of the options, which is to be expected.
Yeah.
But I agree with everything. We have to move on, but I still see that it needs to be 333.
Right, can I bring Chris in to answer some of your...
It is actually very much the case that Cwmbran is a strategic library within Torfaen. I think also the evidence is clear that within other local authorities in Wales and throughout the UK, library authorities are constructed in such a way that they will have a strategic library or more than one strategic library in a big city environment, and that other libraries will be banded below that. And it's not the case actually, and never has been the case, to structure library authorities in such a way that one section of the population will have priority over another. The reason a strategic library is a strategic library is because it has a bigger fund of resources in terms not just of book stock that's on offer, but in terms of local history material, archival material, more specialised and in-depth non-fiction knowledge. It will have a wider range of collections which can't be realistically supplied in smaller libraries. for example, things like foreign fiction. And strategic libraries exist to provide resources for the whole of the population in their authorities above and beyond immediate needs. Now, the fact that a library is a strategic library doesn't mean that professional services cannot and are not delivered in the other libraries. All our 3 libraries in the borough have a well-developed programme of added value services like baby rhyme times, shared reading groups, IT skills sessions, family history sessions. So it isn't about not providing the residents of the smaller towns and populations with a range of services, but in its very nature, a strategic library will have available for the population of the authority a much wider range of access to information and resources in all kinds of formats, which branch libraries, in their very nature, cannot provide. They're not big enough, they haven't got the space, and it isn't appropriate to have those placed in outlying areas. So that is what makes access for a strategic library will be the centre of communications within that authority. And in terms of verifying the fact that Cwmbran is a strategic library, that is highlighted by the fact, and I've had discussions to this effect with people from MALD, the Museums, Archives and Libraries Division of Welsh Government. The reason that we have been able to secure over the lifetime of the Learning Libraries Capital Development Grant Programme 2 grants to develop services in Cwmbran is because Cwmbran is a strategic library and Welsh Government recognises its role as such.
Alan, do you want to come back in on that?
Yeah, I only see that as being a bigger library around strategic. I don't necessarily agree with that description of it. I can see why you're saying that and what you've got from it, but I don't see any reason why that should necessitate it opening 4 days instead of 3. I just can't. It's still open the number of hours. It just means that those staff are there for those number of days, and most people, I think, go in to use lots of those resources in terms of research are sensible enough to do that themselves and do that without a great deal of assistance. Not that they wouldn't require some, but I can't see the reason why that change in the number of hours is a sensible one. I don't think the case is made out in this paper.
I think the other thing that's said in that paper is that a material consideration for complying with the Act is the access to the larger volume of materials. And there is no doubt by having access to the strategic library more often means that most people are able to access more materials. The 2 other libraries don't have the research and all the other materials there. Now, whether you think that's important or not, it means it is literally that more people have access to more materials, which is a material consideration of the Public Libraries Act.
Well, let me move to that. What I've said isn't reduced access. What I've said isn't reduced access, it's open. The only change is to self-service at certain times. So the libraries are open for the times they're open. It's whether they're staffed is a different thing.
Well, I think access in some cases will be supported access, which you won't be able to achieve when it's on a self-service basis only. And going into the reference library and finding what you want to find, believe me, often needs a qualified librarian to actually point you in the right direction. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points I wanted to make. And first of all, I've mentioned this before, the population figures that you've derived here at Blenavon, 6,055. I don't think that's a fair figure because you've got Talawain and the Ghana Rule are very close to Blenavon and they use Blenavon's facilities. So that's the first thing I would say. Now, the other thing I would say is that when we relocated to the Heritage Centre, it was sold to the general public, Blenavon and the areas I just mentioned, that the service would improve, which it would. And now we're a year later, and the service is going to be downgraded. So we feel, and I take Alan's point about the north-south divide, it's a myth, we know that, but people out there don't see it as a myth, they see it as a north-south divide. So I am very concerned about that, and I wanted to make that point.
I really think this is a kind of interpretation, because in actual fact, I think the service which is available to people in Blaenavon has improved by the relocation into the World Heritage Centre. It's a much enhanced, developed, expanded service, and I think it's, you know, I think it's enjoyed and appreciated by people in Blaenavon. I don't really get the point that the service will be downgraded, because the building will be open for the same hours that it is now.
As I see it,
yeah,
they will still
close
continue
the
to be
library.
open. It
Yeah.
will just be that they'll be able
Yeah.
to self-service more often unless you need specialists.
That is a restricted service in itself.
What is self-service?
Self-service, yeah.
Well, that's
'Cause
not-
you can't get the books that you want.
It took me an awful long time to learn how to do self-service in Sainsbury's. I still get really irritated, but that's my age as much as anything. And I think most people will, you know, after a little bit of time, perhaps, find that self-service is actually not so bad. If you only want to go and borrow a book, then self-service, yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to queue up. You don't need that specialist help to help you. And let's be fair, in Blaenavon you've already got the self-service, which we went and we looked and we had a look at it.
Pioneered the self-service, as it says in the report, but the book selection that you use on the self-service is limited, isn't it?
It is in Blaenavon on the Sunday, but not for the rest of the week. So you're picking on the Sunday, which has always been a limited service. That could expand actually going forward, but all the other days it's a full normal service that people use that. And in many libraries, and I think you've got some evidence to show that, is that people use them by preference because they can't be bothered to queue up anymore. So once they get used to it, it's a far more efficient service.
Okay, I think we've exhausted that. Has anybody else got any questions or clarification they need from officers? No? Okay, well, all that's left to say thank you very much. And you can go. Thank you.
Could I just ask one question before the officers go, Chair? The survey that went out to the public, that's closing in January, is that correct?
The survey's closed. You had a sort of an intermediate one. It is closed. We've had just over 1,000 responses. The 3B option was the one that most people went for. And there are lots of comments there, you know. But the majority of the survey, people understood they were picking an option and, you know, understood that it wasn't what everybody wanted, but they were able to pick an option.
Thanks for that, Kath.
Yeah, there was a lot of comments still from the People's Panel, which is all being taken into consideration as well. Okay, thank you once again. The 18th of December was closing date. Okay.
The full report is coming out in February, Catherine.
Okay, right. So we've had a good chance to look and question the officers. I think all that's needed to do is to find out which option is preferred. And as I said, this is the last chance we're going to have to get, if possible, if we can all agree to recommend an option to go to Cabinet next week. So do we want to have a quick talk about anybody, how they feel, or what option they'd rather go for?
Chair, just purely for equity, I think the options should be across the table, and we all have the same option.
Go round and find out which option, Stuart?
I go for the 3 days for all the libraries.
A. Stuart? B. Brian? Phil?
Looking down to the chair, I think I'll go for 3B.
Alan?
3A.
3A. And I think I would tend to go with 3B myself.
Can we make, that's 4-3, I think, but can we make that clear to Cabinet that although by a slim majority we're recommending 3B, we don't see that as necessarily fundamental, something like that. That if they decide to go for 3A, then I ain't going to call that in. No.
It could be.
And also making sure that we put further recommendations in that we future-proof libraries as possible, much as possible.
Sorry, I won at the beginning of the meeting. Was there any apologies for absence?
The only apology we had was from John Marshall and Gwyn Smith.
What I was going to say was, you just said that there isn't much meat left on the bone, is there?
So just to clarify, by a slim majority, the preferred option is 3B, but it was very slim. Obviously, we haven't got the full committee here.
No.
But there was significant support for 3A
As much as,
yeah.
The wording needs to be careful because we don't want to give the impression we're supporting this cap necessarily.
No.
We're all reluctant.
Yeah, I don't think any of us want to cut any service, but we want to make sure that the best service is delivered to the residents. And
what I would say, Chair, if you allow, and I mean, I know we're only discussing this today, but what does concern me going forward, are we going to be in this situation next year?
Well, that's just what...
This is what I just said about recommending that we future-proof libraries as much as possible, and also the officers work together to try and deliver a strategy plan and to support a local plan for libraries. And a more detailed report. Gwyn. Alan.
Can I say, Chair, I think, I think this committee deserves a better paper on it anyway, because I think there are a lot of confusing issues thrown within the paper. So you need a clear paper. But I think it might not just be for libraries. We've had some other papers before in front of us. It may be a general thing for the papers that come in front of us. But they're clear in terms of what they're setting out to do. And there is some form of decision-making process behind it, because I still don't believe that, and I won't go back into all the arguments, there was a decent enough decision-making process behind this which could have led us to a couple of different decisions which would have been beneficial for everyone. I mean, particularly with the library, it's a very emotive subject, and I know whatever we say today it was close, people will say, Cwmbran again, and that's, it's a horrible thing and it's wrong, but it is said, and it's an easy thing for some people to say, and I think if we had a good, strong paper, with enough background information sat there to say, this is the way we've come to the decision, this is the only one we can make, I think it's better for every member of the council. It doesn't matter to me, but I mean, in terms of the council, to say, look, this is all we could do in light of where we are sat. But I think it leaves it open for people to criticise the decision because of the quality of the information. And that's sad on such a subject as libraries when there are people losing their jobs.
I totally agree with you.
No, I don't think I need to now. I was more concerned, one, that I had the right word in, and two, that the strategy be listed, but you've just brought it up. And I've got written down here, more research required to ensure we are providing what customers want and when in order to future-proof the service.
Yeah. One of the things that's evident is that we've got the initial report, and Alan's totally right. We had to dig to get all the rest of this. And it should have been sat there telling us because the figures around it. I mean, it's just a much better report with this sat on top of it.
And this is why we're having this special meeting today, was because members felt there wasn't sufficient information last time. and we had a lot more members here around the table of the committee as well, which would have been helpful today to get a majority, but unfortunately we are where we are. So an odd amount, we did have an odd amount as well, yeah. And taking on board as well, I mean, I've read some of the comments from the People's Panel and the survey. Like Cass says, a majority of people went for 3B as well.
That's why.
So, okay. So is everyone happy with the recommendations put forward to Cabinet next week? Obviously, we're not a decision making. We are just recommending our views to go to Cabinet. Brian, did you want to say anything? No? Yeah? Okay. Right. So all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for coming in. Now we close the meeting.